first big question, can everyone hear me? All right, I feel like it's all downhill after everyone can hear me. First, I'd like to thank the Netlogistik team. I'd like to thank the Argano team, the Avenatti, 12 Consulting. This is our first time here, so we very much appreciate the opportunity, and I wanted to make sure you had our sincere thanks at Anaplan for this opportunity to speak to this wonderful crowd. Thank you. Let's kick it off. That's quite a slide. All right, so who in the room here has either had children or yourself an experience where you were on a team and took a picture of that team? Anyone? Probably most everybody. It's typically you get in your uniform, you go get with your teammates, some of your friends' dads or maybe your own dad or mother is the coach, and you take an awkward picture where somebody holds the sign, the shortest kids are in front, the tallest kids are in back. That has been going on for decades. And that's what I did with my kids last year. Exact same thing we did as kids when we grew up is we all showed up in uniforms, we all got together, and we took that awkward picture that everybody loves. This year, it was different. We showed up in our uniforms, and these are my two sons, my two baseball players. They look fantastic in their uniforms. They have my genetics, so their baseball career is capped. But nonetheless, we showed up, and their teammates weren't there. And they didn't tell anybody this, of course. All that was there was that board and some camera equipment. And so I have the bookends. Hunter's the biggest kid on the team, and then Logan's the smallest kid on the team. And one by one, they would walk up and get their picture taken. And nobody said a word. We left. We never saw the coach. We never saw any of the teammates. And I realized at that point, I'm like, AI has taken over absolutely everything in our lives. It is going to permeate every piece of society because if it's permeating the Little League photograph, it's going to permeate absolutely everything. Here is what the outcome was. So this was the pictures we got back. And the team picture of note was all of the kids were stitched together by AI, including the coach. So we have an overall team picture that looks exactly like this with a beautiful sky, with all of the players who never actually saw each other that are now photographed together. That is the world we live in, and I think that's going to be the world that we live in perpetuity going forward. Now, AI, to me, nailed it here. Boy, did they look sharp. There's another conference I went to where I actually had an AI headshot taken. And I really feel like the headshot nailed it. I think they got me really, really well. Perfect, absolutely perfect. I've been thinking about updating LinkedIn, but I thought I might get a few phone calls to see if I was okay. But it was at the GS1 Connect conference last year, and they took those photos, and I had one taken. And interestingly enough, sometimes AI gets it, sometimes it doesn't. Over time, it'll get better and improve and eventually take my hair away like life did anyways. That said, thinking about AI in the supply chain. There's a lot of talk and buzz around AI. We've all heard about it today. I think in supply chain, it probably has the best use cases that are out in the marketplace today. And that's because, inevitably, you get all of the things we've talked about today. I usually call it the Baskin-Robbins scenario where there's 31 flavors of disruption. Someone corrected me one time and said it's actually 1,400 flavors. It's just a little bit of a mix. However much disruption you think is out there, it's out there. And the ability to work around that next black swan is the difference between success and failure. And that black swan could be pandemics, it could be tariffs, it could be government shutdowns. It could be a lot of different things that we haven't even thought of yet. I remember one year there was a volcano where the soot in the air made the planes have to go in different directions. All of those things are here and they're not going away. And to me, the promise of AI is being able to work around that disruption and still be an effective business and identify opportunities before your competition does. And that's when I'm thinking about AI. That's how I'm framing it. Now, is anyone here, anyone in the room a member of the Association for Supply Chain Management, the ASCM? All right, we have one. Really big organization around the world. It's global, membership from different companies and vendors. And every year, as a matter of fact, I think they just released their 2026 variety, but every year they release their top 10 trends in the supply chain. And no surprise, 2025, right at the top of the list is AI. Right below that is global trade and geopolitical policies. And then right below that is big data and analytics. And all of those are framed up and I think wrapped up into one when you start thinking about organizations in the supply chain and what they really view as a priority going forward. Now, if you take a look at what their membership voted on, this is how it plays out across the score model, which if you've been following the ASCM, they used to be Apex, and then they went to the Supply Chain Council. So there were a number of acquisitions, but they have always put forward their go-to-market has always been the SCORE model, the Supply Chain Operational Reference model. Now, I think in the Google presentation, you had the classic model that we all know, plan, source, make, deliver, return. They created a 2.0 of that, which I always struggle with, so I have to read it. Orchestrate, plan, order, source, transform, fulfill, and return. That's their net new version. But in the end, what I think is important is the heat map that they developed. And that heat map showing where do these trends, where are they most impactful? And if you look at the AI componentry on the planning side of the house, you can see for artificial intelligence, there is no better lever. There is no better lever than AI. And that's simply put because planning is effectively data and math. And AI is data and math. This is the perfect breeding ground for all AI use cases. So if you're thinking about how are we going to use AI and you work in the supply chain, this is a great place to start. Likewise, if you look right below that, there's also the big data and analytics and the agility and resilience, which are all related to your planning capabilities. But I thought this was a really interesting way of visualizing some of those trends and where we see our customers talking about AI. Now, we've sort of pulled apart the AI conversation in a few different ways. I just wanted to frame it very quickly for the purposes of this presentation. We look at it as traditional AI, ML, that's your predictive forecasting, the demand forecasting that's been around forever. That being said, there's a lot of very interesting new techniques around the forecasting process, in particular getting to very, very granular levels where the time periods are very short. How do you take advantage of those type of trends and that type of demand shaping? All of those predictive capabilities then can feed into your generative models. And that's where you're getting recommendations from co-planners about what should you be doing. So if you're a planner and you're selling through your inventory too quickly, what should your next step be here? Why don't you tell me, AI? Or perhaps you have too much inventory on hand. How do you get rid of that inventory? How do you move it somewhere else where it's going to be, where you can get rid of it at full price? All of those things are recommendations that can come from an AI engine. But I think the real beauty of when you start thinking about AI is, okay, but then what do you actually do about it? Because in this scenario here with agentic AI, the ability to work around processes before they become a problem for a planner becomes extremely important. So in most cases, what you're going to hear from planners is, well, I have an exception on my dashboard so I can focus on my exceptions. Well, that is the right way to think about it because you can prioritize your tasks based on those exceptions. But with agentic AI, what you have the ability to do is make sure that exception never hits your dashboard. Because you know that if you have too much inventory on hand, you can run a promotional sequence to help run that down. You know if you have too much inventory on, or too little inventory on hand, you can move it around based upon sequences from an agent. That's to me, the promise of AI on the planning side of the house is that ability to orchestrate outcomes before they actually hit your dashboard as an exception. So that's the way we frame it. And then I think about, why is this so difficult? Because you always hear, oh, geez, planning, it's so difficult. It's usually a variety of different things, but here's my point of view on why it's so difficult. Number one is you have systems and data everywhere. If you look across any function at a business, supply chain is going to have the most fragments of anyone else. So if you take a look at your common systems that you have across marketing, across HR, across finance, you're not going to find the fragmentation that you do on the supply chain side of the house. This is, for better or for worse, a fact of life on the supply chain side of the house. You're going to have to work with a wide variety of types and stripes of different systems. Some are new, some are old. Some talk to each other, others don't. This is a challenge in supply chain that has to be navigated. So when we talk about AI being data and math, it's a little bit more complicated than that because the data lives in a lot of different places. And then you have the age-old problem of you have an executive meeting and my inventory numbers are different than your inventory numbers for the exact same question. My sales numbers are different than your sales numbers for the exact same question. My shipments are different than your shipments for the exact same question. That is because, if you go back to the previous slide, if I knew how to go back on this, maybe I do. Oh, I do. If you go back to this, that's because all of your analytics are anchored to many different places in this ecosystem where the queries are swimming through different places in that ecosystem. So you might have elegant metrics, but your metrics are hard to compare. Now, you can fix that in your planning process, right? Should be easy. What happens, though, is that organizations will make different decisions at different times based upon different needs. And whether it's your sales planning, your demand planning, your transportation planning, I feel like Forrest Gump here with the shrimp, your pricing and promotion planning, your long-range planning, your procurement planning, you can go down the list. There's a lot of different types of plans out there, and what we see is that organizations will invest in certain places, and if something doesn't work, or maybe there's a new trend that's popped up in the marketplace, they dump to Excel. They dump to spreadsheets. And that becomes a really big problem when you say, well, we have a Fortune 500 company that runs their entire supply chain on the back of Excel spreadsheets. That doesn't work. There's no way to make that work. It will never work, but it is a workaround for tomorrow. And that's the way a lot of organizations think about their planning processes. And that's one of the reasons when we start talking about sophistication and AI and getting ahead of problems with agents that are running behind the scenes. If you're doing this, that's really difficult to do, because your data is living in these personal productivity tools that are spread across your company with VBA that's been developed by somebody that may not be alive anymore, that at that point you have to make very strategic decisions on top of. This is not the exception. This is what we see Fortune 500 companies doing on a pretty regular basis. Now, I know probably not your organization, but the person right next to you may have this exact problem. Now, once you, of course, have your plans built, we're going to workflow this thing to make sure that we have the proper approvals and we can get these things out the door really, really quick. Except there's no workflow. Or there's workflow here or workflow there. There's no good process for getting this out the door. And that becomes a problem when you're stitching together a tapestry of different data sources, a tapestry of different applications. And we see this over and over again across large companies. They may have some planning process, but once they go for the approvals, it's just simply not there. And if you start marrying different groups, let's say sales and marketing to your supply chain, there's definitely nothing there because they bought siloed applications. I don't know if any of that makes sense to the folks in the room, but this is what we commonly see at our customer sites and prospects around the world. Now, that is why McKinsey, of course, they've done a number of studies, but that's why you see a report from McKinsey that says that 13% of organizations that they work with and on their pulse check in 2025 feel prepared in the operational dimension. Basically, it's all things resilience. If you want to work around one of those 31 flavors of disruption, only 13% really feel like they can actually do that. All of what I just walked through is exactly why. So, we've talked a little bit around the data pieces in puzzle. We are at Anaplan very new to this ecosystem. So as a result of that, I did want to at least pause and say, who's Anaplan? Because we're new players here and we just want to make sure you understand who exactly we are. And then talk a little bit around some of the data investments that we've made relative to AI and give you a few examples of where AI has been put in place. How many of you have heard of Anaplan in the room? All right, good. About half. For those of the other half, I'll introduce us to you. We are a planning-only product. We do nothing with execution whatsoever. So we work with our execution partners. We build the plans. They execute them. We do that for 2,400 customers around the globe. We work across multiple domains. So supply chain and retail planning is our fastest growing domain across the business. We also work in HR and workforce planning, sales and marketing, as well as in the Office of Finance, and we are a connective tissue across all of those different COEs. We have about a $500 million investment from our ownership to go build 3 specific things. One is our platform. Two is our application strategy, which we have across both supply chain and retail applications. And number three is our Anaplan Intelligence, which is AI, baking that into every aspect of life from an infused AI perspective. We've been in the AI business for over 10 years. Our forecasting product has made over 94 million predictions. This is a space we are very comfortable in, and we're helping organizations all around the world. From a data perspective, because we keep talking about data and I keep coming back to it because I think it's so important. I really don't think you can have AI without proper data management. It is not a good investment of your time to go put garbage in to get garbage out, because the recommendations you get, you're going to run your business on, and you want to make sure those are correct. At Anaplan, we work with large companies, upmarket enterprise. And in that large company space, they have large data volumes. So when you think about data volumes, just some numbers for scale. We're a global business, 2 million customer models in production and growing at over 50,000 per month. You need CPU power to power your AI strategy. So it's not just data, it's also the CPU power. More than 500,000 CPUs and 7.3 petabytes of data in memory at all times around the globe. And for scope and scale on that, that's 15 zeros on the petabyte side of the house. This is a massive data estate. 3.3 million integrations per day and growing at 70% per year. And if you look at our workspace, where the planning is actually getting done, in 2023, we had 400 terabytes of workspace. Now we have 7,300 terabytes and growing. This is a growing business, upmarket enterprise, and a big driver behind that is AI, because everyone in this room goes back to their board and they say, hey, listen, how can we use AI to be a better business? We get that question at almost every single meeting. I was in San Francisco, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Very first question at a major apparel retailer that we're at, we came there for a very specific reason. They said, listen, first hour we want to talk about what you're doing in AI. That is almost every customer meeting that I'm going to these days. We begin and end with AI. And of course, when you're talking about data and you're talking about technology, big companies make decisions based upon the investments they've made. So on the hyperscaler side of the house, Google, Azure, AWS, being able to activate your investments through those three major marketplaces becomes a really powerful capability for large companies to be able to have access to high volume planning while at the same time through their traditional means of doing business. So if there's anything I want you to walk away from today, Anaplan specializes in supply chain. We specialize in large volumes of data so that will power the AI strategy for our customers today and for years going forward. Now, this is a very busy slide that I did not design, so do not blame me for this. That being said, what we wanted to get across here was most of the time where you find Anaplan, most of the time, we are going to be working with the investments that you have made on the execution system side of the house. It could be in this example here from a large pharmaceutical company where they're using Anaplan for demand planning or looking over a 10-year horizon connecting sales, finance, and manufacturing, but working together with a supply planning partner where they're looking at the less than 1 year or typically the short-term supply planning. There's other execution systems involved, there's cost plans involved, and there's an IBP layer, integrated business planning layer, that sits on top of all of that. This is the world we live in. We will meld to your environment, and we will take advantage of the investments that you made. And that is the world for Anaplan, and that's typically what we see at most of our Anaplan customers. Let's skip that one. And as part of that, what lies beneath, part of our investments that we're making are on the data management side of the house. We've been making those data management investments for the last several years, and now is the time that they have started to pay off. We've created something called Anaplan Data Orchestrator. The name is not important. What is important is a full-scale data management platform specific for planning that will activate all of your planning data inside of the AI models that we have infused in all of our supply chain applications. This is a really, really important point to make for organizations that are thinking about AI. Being able to have access to your demand data, your sales data, your production data, your financial data, your distribution and transportation planning data, and connect those, allowing your AI models to crawl those, is what's going to create leverage for you and your key constituents, your customers, and your partners out in the field. Having siloed AI is a little bit tough. You're going to get some recommendations, but it's having access to all of that data that really is going to drive results for you. This is where we have been investing, is in that data management layer in order to activate our AI strategy. All that said, I did want to put a pin in this very quickly. There is still always the human in the loop and the human that wants to be able to run scenarios. And being able to run scenarios is extremely important. And what we've heard from our customers, there's a very large apparel, retail, and wholesale customer of ours that just spoke for us at an event in New York a couple of weeks ago at Merchandise Planning USA. And one of the things they mentioned was when we built out our assortment planning and our merchandise financial planning applications, we had no idea how important scenario planning was going to be relative to tariff management. Really didn't know it. So now we have that ability, as a planner, I can look at, okay, what's the impact of these tariffs? What's a version of the plan that I want to submit as a result of what's going on right now? So having that human in the loop, being able to run as many scenarios as you want, is a highly desirable capability that we have found within supply chain and retail customers. But before I kick this video off, I do have a video for you because all of that data management and the AI componentry discussion that we just had, it's going to filter into a set of AI capabilities. One of those is around a supply chain analyst that we have running inside of our technology. So I wanted to give you a quick video preview to get excited about some of the work that we're doing that lives directly within inside of Anaplan relative to being able to execute supply chain tasks.
From tariffs and demand swings to production delays and bottlenecks, your supply chain faces constant change. You need AI that helps you stay in control in real time. Meet Anaplan Supply Chain Analyst, your AI agent for real-time supply chain planning. Trained on over a decade of planning best practices on supply chain-specific knowledge and experience with millions of planning models. Because the best operational decisions require planning for what's next, right now. Your AI agent is always on and ready to alert you to potential disruptions, flagging things like delays, cost fluctuations, and demand spikes that can impact your plans. In one simple chat, ask your supply chain analyst to address high-risk scenarios, factoring in things like supplier availability, lead times, and cost impact. Your analyst will provide you with scenarios to see the impact across your entire network, so you can leverage insights quickly and minimize disruption. Your supply chain analyst is a true partner. No matter where you're working, it's always there to keep your plans on track. Decision-making has never been faster. What used to be slow and manual now happens instantly, so you can keep your supply chain moving at the speed of AI. Anaplan Supply Chain Analyst, built, trained, tested, delivering the next era of productivity today.
Pretty exciting, right? That ability to have that baked into your planning capabilities so that your planners can take advantage of it is a really impactful set of capabilities for all things supply chain planning. This is where our product management is focused on, is how do we build these supply chain analysts to actually go solve problems for supply chain planners. And if you want to think about it in a more step-by-step way, taking that to the next step on the agentic AI piece, if I walk you through this map here, basically what I'm going to take you through is the step-by-step. So if you start out looking at step one, overnight, overnight there's been a load of shipping manifests that have come in, and there's been a delay due to a typhoon in the South China Sea. That's kind of at the bottom end here. I've talked about all the data management investments that we've made at Anaplan. This is where they manifest themselves. So as the data flows into the planning system, it's looking for, there's an anomaly in the data. We've found something that looks off. That something that looks off kicks off a set of processes. That anomaly event gets raised, and number 4, the anomaly gets consumed by a supply chain agent, which has now been armed with the information around the typhoon in the South China Sea and the shipments being off. It's going to go then query our large language models to look for a solution, and then it's going to bring it back into our supply chain agent to crunch the data to make recommendations on what should be done next and orchestrate an outcome for that particular occurrence. That's then going to be fed back in number 7 to the actual supply chain planner. So what's going on behind the scenes is the data flows into the system recognizes there's a problem, it kicks off a process, it brings in our supply chain agent, it crunches the data, makes recommendations, and orchestrates an action for that planner, and the planner is the human in the loop. That planner can decide whether they want to accept that solution or not, or you could set it up to be automated. one of the questions we commonly get is around that human in the loop, and we absolutely believe that the human in the loop is a process that you want to be there in the places that make sense for you. Now, what I'm going to leave you with is an example here. And this example is around workflow. Think about an agent that's being built. So this is a workflow around a payroll process. We've put in an image, and the workflow builder is using AI to determine what your workflow should be for this particular process. Now, this woman here, her name is Kate, and we've all been her before. She is drawing a process on a whiteboard. And on that whiteboard, you're mapping out that detailed process. You take a picture, and then usually you delete it or forget it. But in this case, we're going to pump it over into Anaplan. It's going to read that image, and it's going to build the workflow that you designed on that whiteboard. Now it's asking, is this correct? That's where the human in the loop comes in. Or you could use more of the, I'm going to communicate with the system. I want a process that looks at pay raise information. We're going to type in that process, and we're going to generate a workflow. Is this correct? Again, the human in the loop. Now, we're going to walk you through a set of steps. In this case here, we'll help you build that workflow. So as we build that workflow, then it's going to say, okay, is this correct? Once again, the human in the loop. So if you think about AI in the supply chain, we started out talking about predictive capabilities. And then we said, okay, well, we've been in this business for a long time, 94 million predictions. There's a lot of forecasting engines out there, and sometimes those forecasting engines aren't ours. You need to be able to incorporate data from a wide variety of different places. That's the predictive piece. On the generative side, having a co-planner that can give you recommendations on what you should be doing as a planner is the generative piece. And then finally, you have the agentic piece, which can take feeds from both your predictions as well as your generative recommendations to go orchestrate outcomes for specific processes. So we're selling through our inventory too quickly. How do we make sure that we can reorder that inventory? Or we have too much on hand. How do we move that on hand to the right places so we can sell it more frequently at full price? That is where we're invested on the Anaplan side of the house. That's where our customers want to see supply chain and AI going, and that's where we feel like the biggest opportunity for everyone in this room is. So with that, I'm going to open up the floor for 1 minute, because I do have 1 minute and 13 seconds. Does anyone have any questions based on the content that's been presented today? Somebody's got to have one question. So I'll ask myself a question. Typically the questions you get here, one is around the human in the loop. Yes, the human will be in the loop. Two is this baked into your solutions today? Yes, we have co-planners that are baked into our solution today. Our product management is actively working on all things AI today so that we can have a fully baked out, fully agentic point of view around all things supply chain and Anaplan. So I really appreciate everyone's time today. Please come see us at the booth. We'd love to give you a demo, and thanks again for everyone's time and attention.